Good morning to everyone, dear colleagues and friends. I hope you all feel perfect this morning and are ready to start. I send my warmest greetings to all of you and also want to thank Joanna and all the other colleagues for organizing this event. As this is my first ever attempt to record the presentation, I sincerely beg your pardon for any discrepancies and technical faults. When Joanna suggested to make this presentation with a focus on Borderlands, I gave my consent with an aim that it would be a nice opportunity to share with you not only the general knowledge on borders and borderland studies, but also to give you some information based on my own experience of ethnographic and anthropological fieldwork I've been conducted already for many years in one of the remote and less studied, so to say, borderland corners on our planet. That is the triangle of Afghanistan, Iran and Pakistan, an area with its neighborhoods that has been and is known to many of us, mostly with notorious aspects of conflict, disaster, mass violations of anything possible, smuggling, etc., and less in terms of the daily life of ordinary people living there and facing challenges of various natures, yet considering their lives organically connected with the borderlands. So I entitled the presentation Borderland Studies, Anthropological Approach to the Phenomenon. In the first part I will talk about theoretical framework, and then we'll pass on my own field site that I have already mentioned. I think from the beginning I will quickly pass over some key characteristics of borders in general in anthropology. For instance, Malcolm Anderson, defining the characteristics of borders, stresses that borders are both institutions and processes. As institutions, they mark and draw lines between states, thus featuring the sovereign status of them, as well as that of the citizenship of the population. As processes, borders have more than one function. They can be instruments in the hand of the state to conduct policy and maintain control over the people. As Malcolm calls them, borders or frontiers play a crucial role in creating the nation and the state. Besides, borders can also act as markers of identity in different levels: ethnic, national, cultural, etc. That is the reason why borders have also become a term in frequently used term in discourses and narratives of phenomena like nationalism and identity. The terms borders and borderlands are being used by a wide range of intellectuals and academics and by representatives from various fields of social life of humankind, if we may say so, which indicates that the interest towards this phenomenon and its significance is immensely high, but yet this means also that the topic is not just one and unified, rather there are many topics in this regard. In social sciences generally and in anthropology particularly, where studies on borders have always been in focus, there has never been and naturally could not be a unified, systematic approach to the topic. The usage of various terms like border, border zone, borderland, boundary, as I would call them, the 4 Bs, plus the term frontier, occasionally define entirely different phenomena. All these concepts have been studied by many anthropologists with different approaches. Some have been interested in the social boundaries, others in terms of political space and status, or in other words, the concrete border as simply a line between two states. Here I summarize these definitions, some of them, with examples. The border, the state border, for example, between Russia and Poland, geographical frontiers, former northwest frontier province in Pakistan, and another term, borderlands, with a wide range of political, social, economic structures. Sarhad, that I mentioned above, in the meeting point in the triangle of Iran, Pakistan and Afghanistan. So here we see Russia, Poland, Lithuania border in Kaliningrad Oblast, where we have a line of wire that many of you, I'm sure, might have seen in the triangle meeting point between Lithuania, Poland and Russia. Next, geographical frontier. Here I took the example of the former northwest frontier province in Pakistan, neighboring Afghanistan, which is almost entirely inhabited by ethnic Pashtuns, who are simply cut from their fellow Pashtuns in Afghanistan by the Durand line. Another example, again, is the borderland, a term which I would define as an area. I indicated it with a red line. A vast piece of land where not only the political borders meet, that can be Sarhad, as I mentioned at the beginning. The term Sarhad literally means a border edge, borderline, head of the border. But in fact, it is an area where multiple aspects related to political, cultural, and social realities meet. We have a borderline between Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran in terms of the state control. We have a social boundary within Sarhad itself in terms of the social structures, hierarchical structures of sedentary and semi-nomadic tribes, although in a rapid transformation. From the other side, we have a cultural boundary with the province of Sistan and Baluchistan. The two components of the name of the province indicate the differences between the Persian-speaking Shia population of Sistan in the north and Baluchi-speaking Sunni population of Baluchistan proper in the south. Hence also another type of boundary, the religious one. In other words, the social, cultural and territorial elements of the borders and boundaries are not necessarily mutually exclusive. But here we can face a danger of categorization if we identify these patterns as separate phenomena. In fact, in anthropological research, all these patterns have been studied by an emphasis on differences between themselves during a long-lasting process that has resulted in groundbreaking literature on each aspect. I would like to talk now separately on patterns, on these patterns in anthropological researches. The first is social and symbolic boundaries. The most well-known and immensely cited, as well as criticized work, was published exactly 50 years ago by Frederick Barth. Ethnic Groups and Boundaries, the Social Organization of Culture Difference. A collection of essays, and I bet some anthropologists perhaps have already planned to celebrate the half-a-century anniversary of this publication. According to Barth, the ethnic groups are socially constructed, whose members have a specific strategy to use and manipulate their cultural identity. In other words, to stress and undermine certain aspects of their cultural differences depending on the context. For Barth and the authors of the essays in this collection, the boundary between the groups is the critical focus for examination. Also, it is the ethnic boundary that defines the group, not the cultural stuff. Sandra Wallman, in her turn, brings the idea of opposition into the realm of the investigation of the boundaries between the groups. In her article, The Boundaries of Race, Processes of Ethnicity in England. She argues that social boundaries do not just have two sides, but rather they are characterized by an interface line between inside and outside. So here we see the four-part social boundary matrix created by Wallman. In the vertical columns, we see identity and interface. In horizontal rows, inside and outside, insiders, us, and the outsiders, the others. So if we identify us in opposition to them, in this case we use the boundary for our purposes according to our needs at this specific time in this specific context. And here we have the interface. Here the border around is evolving around the familiar, the normal, and the unproblematic. The other side, the outsiders, they identify themselves by contrast to the rest of us. They use the boundary for their purpose. Here the interface is the beginning of another system. Performance, appearance, activity, social or symbolic structure is different. Almost similar approach we find at Anthony Cohen in his book Symbolizing Boundaries, Identity and Diversity in British Cultures. Cohen insists that a community exists only by virtue of its opposition to another community. Cohen also argues that traditional spatial ties, territorial ties, kinship, and class definitions have all been transformed in the new age. So the structural boundaries are diminishing or eroding. Instead, the aspects of differences are being transported into the minds of the people, thus becoming symbols. So it is in symbolism rather than in structure that we must seek the boundaries of their worlds of identity and diversity. Of course, there has been also vast criticism on such approaches. One point being that if one emphasizes the internal identification rather than external constraints and the shaping influence of wider structures, social, economic, political structures, such as those of class and the state, if ethnicity depends on ascription from both sides of the group boundary, as we saw in Wallman's chart, then one should accept the fact that by that the members of one group might be able to impose their categorizations on the members of another group. From this point, we organically go into the idea of the second pattern, the state, geopolitical and territorial boundaries. In comparison to the social boundaries, the latter have not been studied by anthropologists systematically. The state borders are usually referred as real borders in distinguishing them from the symbolic ones, like in social boundaries, cultural boundaries, etc. The borders in the studies dedicated to this pattern are usually touched in a secondary manner. They have not become the main focus. Instead, the state borders and territorial and geopolitical dimensions of borderlands have been mainly the focus of political and economic studies. Nowadays, there is a growing importance of border perspective in political anthropology, where the relations between border areas and their nations and states have more importance than the local cultures. Here are some references to anthropological works where state borders figure as, if not the key subjects, at least they are touched in terms of explaining the territorial and geopolitical aspects of the given locality. Abner Cohen, the representative of Manchester School, wrote a fantastic book, Arab Border Villages in Israel, a study of continuity and change in social organization. John Cole and Eric Wolf together authored the book The Hidden Frontier, Ecology and Ethnicity in an Alpine Valley. An amazing book by Smadar Levy, The Poetics of Military Occupation, Allegories of Bedouin Identity and Israeli and Egyptian Rule. A classic, Political Systems of Highland Burma, a study of Kachin social structure by Edmund Leitch. And another fascinating contribution by Dutch anthropologist Martin van Bruynissen, Ara, Sheikh and State, the Social and Political Organization of Kurdistan. All these are anthropological works, not necessarily having border and borderland as a crucial subject in their researches, investigations, and in these books, but they somehow touch the idea of state and state borders in their contributions. In any case, as Mark Zalter rightly shows in his article, Places Everyone Studying the Performativity of the Border, quote, "The border is a primary institution of the contemporary state, the construction of a geopolitical world of multiple states, and the primary ethico-political division between the possibility of politics inside the state and the necessity of anarchy outside the state." At the end, here are two important contributions by Hastings Donnan and Thomas Wilson. One authored the first one, Borders, Frontiers of Identity, Nation and State, and the other edited, a companion to Border Studies, which were used as the main sources for this part of my presentation. Now I would like to go back to my field site and spend a couple of minutes talking about practical information from Sarhad, which I characterized as a borderland with variety of social, political, economic boundaries. So in this slide we again see the map of Sarhad. So in terms of state border, we have Afghanistan and Pakistan, Pakistan and Iran, Iran and Afghanistan. So this is a photo I took way back in 2000 during my first visit to Sarhad. On your front and your right side you see the Pakistani side. On your left side is the Iranian side. So there is no wire, there is no border line. I mean, just the road cuts two villages where the same people, the same Baluchi speaking Sunni people live. This is another photo that I took already in 2017. Exactly the same place as in the first photo, but now we have a wall erected by the Iranian government that separates the Pakistani side from Iran, and one can only imagine about the demographic changes that took place in this area when the wall was erected, entire villages have been displaced. Again, this photo shows the same area, the border between Iran and Pakistan, again at the same place as the first picture was taken, although the quality of the first picture was quite poor, but instead it was much easier to go to that area and took photos as much as one would like. Today it's almost impossible. All these signs, warnings by security services show you that it's a dangerous area. So I managed to take this photo from inside the car. Again, the same area. So here is another photo from already an untouched area of Iranian and Pakistani border, where erection of the wall is almost impossible. In the desert, the sand doesn't allow to dig sort of fundament, firm fundament, to create a wall. So I come back again to the map to show some other aspects of social and cultural boundaries within the borderland of Sarhad. So as I said, Sarhad is separated from the southern part of Balochistan, and its distinctiveness can be traced in geographical, economic, political, and social aspects. Geographically, Sarhad is an arid zone. Compared to the south, Sarhad doesn't possess vast fields of date palms, unlike in the south. So the economic situation in Sarhad compared to the south of Balochistan is rather poor. From the point of view of social structures, Sarhad is has a quite distinct feature, as it still preserves the so-called traditional tribal system, tribalism, as the locals call. From the other side, we have the religious aspect. In all the big cities, for example, in the north, Zahedan, in the south, Irashar and Saravan, and also down to the south to the Persian Gulf, the demographic situation is rapidly changing. The central government of Iran inhabits Persian-speaking Shias in this region, trying somehow to limit the manifestation of the Baluchi-speaking Sunni population of Sarhad. So we can say that Sarhad preserves its status as the last, let's say, stronghold of the Sunni Baluchis living in the province. Alongside the border, as you saw, the state also uses the local people for guarding the border. Alongside the border, in every village, there are military operation bases, like this one, as you see in the photo. And also the state plays on the cultural sentiments of the Baluch people, allowing them to wear their military camouflage style traditional garments and not wearing military uniforms. And also the state somehow also gives a credit, a gesture to the tribes by making such kind of writings on the foothills of any famous, let's say, peak or rock inside Sarhat. It's written, the tribes are the guarantors of the revolution. The border between Iran and Pakistan is also acts also as a has also many hub centers for the smugglers. These are some pictures taken from the Pakistani side of the border, where you see the smugglers getting ready to transport the gasoline and oil from Iran to Pakistan. And here is an individual smuggler just riding across the border from Pakistan to Iran. So by this I finish here, and I'm ready. First of all, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready for answering your questions and comments I'm sure you will have. Thank you very much.